Welcome to the Real World Entrepreneurship Podcast. My name is Bhairav Patel.
And I'm Clarke.
And today we're going to be talking about, growing. How do you scale a business? So before we get into all of that, though, Alan, how have things been with you this week? What's new in your world?
I must say, based in Scotland, it's been a bit of a strange time with this new lockdown, but it's not really a lockdown, but it feels very much like a lockdown. And I think that's quite an impact on the whole country in terms of its mood, particularly as we head into winter. So that's been a big theme. But the thing that was particularly relevant to this conversation I wanted to mention to you was a wonderful competition that runs in Scotland called Scottish Edge. And Scottish Edge is a competition that awards prizes and that are a mix of a grant and a loan to interesting entrepreneurial early stage businesses. And it was on Wednesday there, the 7th of October, that they handed out round 16. And I think one of the remarkable facts that came out of that was this is all for young early stage businesses in real need of support. And the commitment of Edge is such that they've now run 16 rounds of competition and awarded £16 million worth of support to early stage businesses in Scotland, to entrepreneurs in Scotland, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. I know a number of businesses that have been through Edge and have benefited from them, and for every single one it was absolutely transformational. It was usually that first meaningful influx of money that allowed them to move on. And Edge, I think the maximum prize is allowed to award is £150,000. That's a lot of money. They don't always hand out £150,000, but 100,000, 70,000, 50,000 are really common. And the final thing just to mention on that, historically, and I think this is one of the issues, what is entrepreneurship in this day and age? Most people think to be an entrepreneur means to be involved in technology. And of course it doesn't. Being an entrepreneur just simply means being somebody that creates and grows a business in whatever you do. And just looking at the list here, you can't see it. Well, I have a list in my hand of this year's winners, or this round's winners, because Edge runs every 6 months. There was a brewery, a space engineering laboratory, a distiller, a skincare manufacturer, a sustainable farming practices business, all sorts of businesses in all sorts of areas that the panel who award of the great and the good, all of whom have walked the walk in Scottish businesses, feel are deserving of support. So you know what? I thought that was just an absolutely wonderful piece of news, and more evidence that there's always opportunities if you've got a great business idea.
It's interesting actually, because there seems to always be a lot more going on in Scotland than in the UK. In England. Sorry.
That's interesting for you to mention, because I'm based in Scotland, I know my environment, and I know there's an awful lot. There is no excuse not to do it.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think, Edge is definitely one that, I've been looking out for over the years. But it's just the ecosystem up in Scotland seems to be a lot more nurturing to businesses than, let's say, in England. Because, if you're looking to apply for the UK Innovate grants or those kinds of things, there just seem to be such a hurdle and such a pain to try and get those grants. Whereas in Scotland, you seem to have a lot more, maybe smaller awards, but there are definitely more of them. Or it seems that there's like a lot more going on there.
And you think that is because there's a greater level of diligence in the national awards, ergo the best companies get them, and there's maybe a lesser level of diligence in Scotland, or is there another dynamic working there?
No, I think I guess diligence is the same. It's a bit like Northern Ireland as well, right? In Northern Ireland, you see a lot more kind of that. I guess it's smaller, and in that sense, that ecosystem seems to be much more cohesive and coherent, rather than in England, where it's a big mix, right? You know, between Birmingham, Manchester, London, there's all that competition that's going on there,
Yeah.
and you just don't seem to see the same level of support in those in England than you do in Scotland. I think that's just generally
I suppose
what I've
that's
seen.
when one recognises that Scotland in its entirety is but a fraction of what sits within the M25.
Mm.
And it's smaller than the Midlands. And it's about the same size as the North. And is there an element in there that is to do with we Scots having our quasi-independence to do our own thing and wanting to do our own thing?
Could be. I mean, it could be that you're just much more entrepreneurial.
Well, I was going to say that, or is it genetic when we go back to Carnegie and all of these guys?
Yeah, no, I think there is something in the Scottish blood, that's for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, there you are, good. So, today's subject is about scaling in uncertain times. Why that today?
Well, I mean, it's something that struck me so during COVID, it's been a bit of a weird one, really, for us, in that we've done well. We've got we've done well with clients. We've got new clients coming on board. And actually, when I took a step back, I realized we actually doubled the size of our team during these last months, which is a bit odd when you think about it, when there's so much uncertainty out there.
Yeah.
And then we've doubled the size of the team, and we're still recruiting and looking to grow. And I sat there the other day thinking, well, this is it, right? You're on that cusp now of, as you scale a business, there's lots of things that can go wrong, right? I mean, obviously, we're in a pandemic. We could lose business, and then suddenly you're left with a bunch of people that you're employing, and then have to get rid of them, or maybe maybe it'll be something that continues, right? And we continue to grow, and we continue to get more work. But then it's also then becomes an issue around culture, and how do you scale it, and how do you create now the levels of I won't say bureaucracy, but basically the levels of management that you need in order to make sure that everyone is working in the same direction, or working towards the same goals, right? And then because we're going from, let's say, 6 to 12, and then maybe 12 to 25. It's not a huge number when you think about it, but actually it does you have to think about it carefully, right? You can't just you just can't.
Is this not the fundamental of having a strategy, having a view on what the roadmap ahead looks like, and preparing in advance for the steps along the way? So, and that begs the question of, have you got a view as to what you would like Atom to become over, say, 3 years from now?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So that's one of the things that so myself and Sam, business partner, we've been discussing over the years, right? And I think we hit that 3-year mark now. So it's one of those things where 3 years is basically when you realize it's no longer a hobby; it's actually a business, right? This is the thing that you're going to do, and because we're growing now, it means that we have to put more structure in place in order to make sure that when we do, as we grow, we don't grow out of control, and we don't have people basically left hanging, not knowing what they're meant to do, what their role is. And so, yes, part of it is strategy. But I think the funny thing is, you can plan all you like, right? But ultimately, things just happen. And for us, 3-4 months ago, we were never thinking like this, right? And then suddenly one thing came along, and then another thing came along, and then suddenly, we've got a huge new client base, and they all want slightly different things from us from what we were originally expecting to do, which is good. But it's not. I don't think I could have planned for this, really. And what I think is quite interesting is that, let's say when I was working in Aztec, and we started off there, I think we actually started with 20 people, and then that grew to like 60 over a couple of years. But that felt a little bit more natural in the way, because you already started with a decent sized team, right? And then adding more people kind of made it easier. Whereas when you start with a 4 or 5 and then increase that's a bit weirder.
I think that's a very common theme, that usually the most challenging hire for any business is when they go from 1 person to 2 people. They double the size of the business, they double the number of points of view, and they exponentially increase the management task, because now you've got somebody to manage. And that is absolutely terrifying. But the point does come on the scaling journey, where you know, another 5 people, it's just another 5 people. It's not going to upset the apple cart. But in those early stages, it can be pivotal for a business, whether it succeeds or fails.
Yeah, and exactly it. And also, the one thing I'm noticing at the moment is, everyone needs to then step up to the plate, right? So it's not just about, myself and Sam managing more people. It's actually about getting the people below us to do actually step up and start managing themselves. So putting them into new positions that they necessarily may not have had experience in previously, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I think things are. Those are the kind of challenges that we face at this stage, I think, and making sure that everyone is comfortable in the new roles that they have, and then ensuring that they know that we have some measurements in place, so we understand not only have they got the roles and responsibilities, but we actually measure them. Mm-hmm. And then how do you measure them, right? Like what metrics are you going to use, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where I think it gets interesting for me, because I've done it like a few times before. This is not the first time that I've done it, but it's always. It's never. I would never say it's straightforward. It's one of those things that you've got to be quite careful, because the individuals you're working with are always different, right? And it's figuring out how can they step up and how can they cope. And like I said, I think it's like you said just now, right? I think it is a lot easier to scale when you already have mass than when you have very few people.
It's about noticeable differences. When we had Team Rock, we had about 125 people. Adding on 5 more, we knew actually didn't really make a lot of difference. And if it all went terribly wrong, it would be all right. But the really early stage was terrifying, because you don't have a culture, you don't have a way of working, you don't have a management team, all of those things you're describing there. You don't have a style of work, and you don't have a support mechanism around it. When you go from 6 to 12, the 6 originals have now got to effectively, in theory, mentor one entire person each.
Exactly. So you bought a company though, didn't you, at the very beginning? So when you started, so how was that? How was that experience to purchase a company and then try and fit them into your culture, I sense?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I don't think we've got enough days on this podcast to cover it up. I think the absolute gift that we had was that we bought a section, a division of a business out of a company that wasn't terribly happy with the company that had previously been working for. And we also offered them the opportunity to throw off the shackles of how it had been and embrace a whole new world. And the staff seemed to really enjoy that. That said, there was issues then that the vast majority were on board, but there was always some people in there that were never going to get quite up to the plan, quite up to the new way of working. Because effectively we offered them a whole digital future. And most of them wanted that, but some of them were a little bit too long in the tooth and just wished it would carry on being how it used to be before.
Right. So then, was that quite disruptive? Were they very disruptive, or were you able to kind of?
They were disruptive. They were disruptive because, almost by definition, the ones that were most influential in that group were the ones who had the more senior roles, frankly. So they were able to actually be heard when they moaned and complained. I'm sure there were some that I never even noticed when the best one of all, who moved on quietly, who just said, this new future's not for me. But the ones that didn't move on were the ones who, as I say, were further up that tree, maybe had either more to lose or knew they had a platform to share their views on how it should be.
I think that's so. I mean, for us at the moment, I guess we don't have any of those issues at the moment, which is great, obviously, because it's a small team that is now growing. But I think what is it's going to be very interesting to see the type of people that we end up hiring. Now we over the last few months, we've hired a couple of people. Some people have come and gone, and it's been very odd. The ones who've left have left for their own reasons. Not we weren't scary or horrible or anything like that to them. But what I think I've been struggling with when we're hiring people at the moment is to ensure that they have the right motivation for the work that they're doing. Right. So obviously, job is a job, right? But you kind of, when you're at the stage, you're still quite small, you want them to really adopt that culture that we've got, the kind of way that we're thinking, right? And have it, and be still a little bit, all things to all people, because, when you're still at the level of 12 people, people do need to think a little bit outside the box, right? Yes, your roles are defined, but you need to kind of get them to do slightly different things than just their role. We need to get them to.
Absolutely. And that comes down to I think the three fundamental things that every growing business needs to align. And the most obvious one of all is the opportunity. Is there a demand for what you do?
Yeah.
If there isn't, you're not going to scale your business. And that, for me, flows through into, growing a business in uncertain times. Well, if you've got a good idea and a demand for it, doesn't matter whether the times are uncertain or not. There's an awful lot of businesses that have done spectacularly well over the last 8 months because the opportunity maybe grew exponentially with lockdown, lots of technology firms in there. The next one is the availability of funding, whether that's self-generated funding or grant funding through things like Scottish Edge, or investment to be able to grow the business. But fundamentally, all of that means nothing if you can't get the right talent.
I think what's interesting here,
if you haven't got the right talent, you can't grow a business.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what's interesting here is that we talk about uncertain times, but I'm not actually sure that uncertain times make a big difference, because all the issues are still the same, right? You have to hire the right people. You have to ensure that the business is there, the work is there, that they can do, that you're paying people the right salaries, you're paying them well, having that structure, that organization. And I don't think the pandemic really changes anything, because all the issues that you would face are the same. I think at the moment, I think the only thing that changes with the pandemic is that there's more talent available.
Yeah.
Because there's more people out of work, right? So there's definitely more that can be done.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that, because if you're growing and starting up any business, there's only an absolute few who would say there isn't uncertainty, but there might be belief. But there is always, it is the unknown, the future is the unknown. So uncertainty is the norm for any entrepreneur. In fact, it is the dynamic I think a lot of it, or all entrepreneurship thrives in. Because if everything was known and certain, where would the opportunities be?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's for us, it's going to be it's an interesting time, I think, and it's exciting, right? So this is when things become real, really, in many ways for the business, because there's not just a few of you tinkering around. It's now we have to have a proper chain of command. We have to have, like I said, we have to have the reporting in place. We have to have people who are managing it. You have to start doing your 360 feedback. It can't just be how you pick up the phone and say, "Hey, how you doing? Is everything all right?" You need to then actually make sure everything is.
And how does that impact on you and what you want to do?
Yeah, this is always the problem, right? In the sense that it makes you. You just add so much more burden, like much more paperwork to your day, right? So you have to start, when you're putting in the structure, you can't be as free and easy anymore as it was previously, in the sense that, if I want, I now know, I can't just call on people to go and get stuff done. I'm going to have to say, okay, you've got to organize their work. We're going to make sure that they know what they're doing, that everything's explained to them. Why do we do things in the way that we do things? All of that. And it becomes like, there's a big overhead to all of it, right? And hiring people is.
I asked you earlier about your vision for the business and that model, that idea of what does it look like 3 years from now? And you're absolutely right. You're going to be driven by opportunity, but that doesn't mean you can't have a view on, if everything goes how I would like it to go, this is what the business will look like. What does the business look like?
So, I mean, for us, it's going to be, we've discussed this a number of times, and there'll be some development center somewhere, most likely India at the moment, because that's where we've got a lot of our people. But we'll be building a team out there, and ideally, what we've wanted to do is have satellite offices in other countries, right? So if everything does work out, we have a footprint maybe in somewhere like Singapore, or we have a footprint in somewhere like the US, and that can be a basis from where we can work. And a lot of it is also driven by the fact that, Sam and I want to travel more. I think everyone within the company, the original people who started the business, the one theme that runs through all of us is that we want to travel. We want to be able to be mobile and work in different countries. Obviously, Brexit puts a bit of a kibosh on all of that.
Yeah.
It'll make it a little bit harder to be digital nomads, as they say. But I think that's always the key, is for us to be a global business, and we have global clients, right? Clients around the world. So that's
And how
it's just
important is
building.
it that you are where they are?
I think it doesn't actually, in this world, I think COVID's done us a favor in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Because when we were doing the virtual CTO piece, people were finding it very difficult. The whole virtual thing was very difficult for people to get their head around. Now I think it's much easier, because obviously everything is virtual. It's how do you do business development in a country where you're not operating, right? In the sense that you're not physically there. And that's where I think, again, that's where COVID is kind of opening doors or making you think differently, because how do you get new business if you can't go and shake hands and meet people and go to events, right? It's hard. But the same template that we use now, and joining wherever it's associations or getting our word out there, doing marketing, etc., those processes can still apply to different countries. But of course, we do need to have, I think you still need to have for some of these things that we do, you kind of have to have some sort of presence there, so that people, at least for time zone purposes, at least.
So what's the most important thing that's going to define your success over the next 3 years?
I think, well, obviously, the way I look at it, in a way, it's profitability, right? We can build a business and the business is going well, but is it going to be a profitable business, or are we just every month just making enough money so that we can all pay ourselves? And that's the thing. So once you hit that profitability mark, it's okay, what are we doing with that money? Where are we investing it?
So that's about that availability of funding actually comes up near the front of your prioritizing.
Yeah. So, I mean, actually, again, COVID did us a bit of a favor, really, because we took the bounce back loan. We didn't need it, but actually that's something where, because we took it because of the uncertainty piece, right? Because you weren't quite sure whether our customers would go away. But now it's there, it can be used to grow, which is exactly what it's meant for, I guess. It's that bouncing back, right? So it means that we can go and get more people on board. Yeah. And I think that's
I'm
the
certainly
key.
familiar with that with a number of the companies I work with who have looked upon it as cheap working capital.
It is. And I don't know whether it's been, that was the initial intention, probably not, right? When they were giving the money away, but I think it's actually been a very good bonus. It's been a great bonus for many
I
businesses.
think the original intention was actually gap funding. Some liquidity to get you through to liquidity returns.
Yeah, and it's great, and it has done that for us as well, right? So but like I say, it's also given us a bit of a buffer so that we know that we can actually do something with that money as we grow, so that we don't have to, obviously cash flow issues are the biggest concern. So I think from us, what do we look like? So it's got to be a profitable business. It's got to be something that we all enjoy doing, right? So I think the key thing for us has always been making sure that we work with people that we want to work with, and we're doing the work that we doing the work that we want to do, not the work that we have to do. You see what I mean? So not having to do work just because we want to get money in.
So that is funding number one, and that's about availability of talent in your business. You want the right people in your business, ergo you have to have the right work for them to do.
Exactly.
Or you have to attract them.
Exactly. And I think what we've realized quite quickly now is that, we initially thought we could hire a bunch of juniors and train them up, et cetera, but what we've realized is actually that's not the way forward really for us at the moment. We need to have much more senior people coming in early so that they can, I hate to use the phrase, but you can hit the ground running, right? So you don't have to worry about educating them and bringing them up to a level. They're already at that level.
That's interesting. You mentioned that about not going down the junior inexperienced low cost route. I did a piece in LinkedIn this week, very much along that theme, which was around the fact that sometimes it just takes time for good things to happen. And that means, as well as many other dimensions, building experience. building expertise that then means quickly one can do great things rather than having to learn and make mistakes along the way. And actually, I'm minded to set up a consultancy and call it Codgers. And you've got to be old to be in it. And anybody that buys into that view of, I'd rather have an experienced person than an inexperienced person, Codgers might just be the one for them.
I think that's a great idea. Actually, the thing is, it's interesting that because, I did a podcast with a guy who's got something called Dave Watts got this thing called the Redundancy Podcast. And when I was talking to him, he was, saying that it is harder for people who are older to find work. But actually, when you think about it, why should that be the case? Because actually, if you're good at what you do and you've got the experience, then you can, the time for you to be, like the amount of time it takes for you to be useful is much shorter. So that actually allows the business to grow quicker because you've got people who are not having to worry about, training them up, and they know what they're doing, hopefully.
Well, we have time's marching on today, but that brings up a theme for another podcast. There's you're mentioning earlier about the entrepreneurial scene in Scotland. There is a simply fabulous program in Aberdeen that was conceived largely around grey-haired people, frankly, coming out the oil industry, who still had an awful lot to offer, but were unlikely to get hired back in where the international oil companies, they go young and cheap. And that program, when you now spun out a range of businesses, is called Grey Matters.
Right, okay.
Really nice. And I know somebody who's heavily involved in that, so I think we should invite her on for a whole session on entrepreneurialism and not being the purely in the field of the young.
No, definitely, and that's the key, isn't it? I mean, there's no age, there's no age restrictions on being an entrepreneur, right? Or starting a business. You can do whenever you want, and oftentimes people who start later on in life are more successful, right? Simply because they understand how the world works a little bit more, let's say.
Well, there's all those statistics around most successful entrepreneurs have got a couple of 3 failures behind them.
Yeah, definitely.
Because one does learn as one goes along.
Yeah. What was it? Something like some statistic years ago about the richest men in the world and how many of them had been bankrupt before, right? So there was a vast number of 70% of people who are millionaires have been bankrupt at least once before.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's been great talking to you today.
And you're in sunny Croatia.
I am indeed, and I will. I think I'm going to make sure I stay out here as long as I can.
Well, I have to admit my background is not really the view at my window, but it's pretty good in Glasgow right now for October.
Yeah, well, enjoy your lockdown.
Thank you. Well, yeah, only 2 more weeks, but I'll see you again shortly for our next edition.
Definitely.
And thanks everybody for listening in.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.